All right, we are here at Elegoo Records, and I'm going to show you a few things that I picked up while I'm digging in the city. All right, the first two I picked up were 12 inches by the time. It's Get It Up and Cool. The album that these two came from were actually came out the same year as Controversy by Prince. So in essence, this is two Prince records in '81 because the only two people that performed on this record was Morris Day and Prince. Even though he had Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Jesse Johnson in the band, they were only for the concerts, not necessarily this particular record. What I found interesting about that Time album was that at the time that it came out, it was aligned with a lot of the other bands that were doing the synth-based funk kind of music. And I would assume, just like the Gap Band, Zap, Midnight Star, that they would come out with Sequence and space suits, what have you. But when I saw the album, they were actually six brothers in front of a broken down row house. And that look for them has pretty much been their calling card since day one. They still dress like that to this day. Next record I have is Saint Germain Tourist. This particular record I actually picked up in the new release section, and I would have been curious to see where Don actually placed this record because it's on a jazz label, but it actually has elements of hip-hop, acid jazz, trip hop, trance, and it features probably songs that you've probably heard before. Rose Rouge, which samples Marlena Shaw, and Sure Thing, which actually samples John Lee Hooker. And if you've ever gone to any fashion show or boutique clothing store or some rooftop party, you've probably heard this record before. But I was just surprised to see it in 12-inch form, double album. All right, the next one I have is one that I'm not familiar with, although I know the label, Fili International, and it was at that time in '74, so I'm not exactly sure what this record is all about. That's one of the things about digging for records. Sometimes you just got to take a chance based on the label, when it was made. This was produced by Bobby Martin, one of the Fili International stable of producers, and it also has some key guys that I always say, if you ever see these guys on a record, you have to pick it up. That's Earl Young, Ronnie Baker, Norman Harris, and Larry Washington, the conga player. So if you ever see those guys on a record, you definitely have to pick that up. So I'm going to take a chance on this one. Not exactly sure what's on here, but I'm going to give it a shot. I just have a passion for records. And I just, it's something about going to a record store, holding up that vinyl, reading the credits. Some of the things that you can find on vinyl, 12 inches in particular, you can't find on the internet now. Acapellas, instrumentals, dub versions. So a lot of that you have to have on, you can only find on 12 inches. And it seems like there's been a rebirth in terms of DJs going strictly to vinyl now. So that's encouraging. You've got Violent Vibes, Wax Fundamentals. These guys are doing strictly vinyl events, so right up my wheelhouse. I actually picked up the LTD cut, the classic cut, Back in Love Again, which was produced by Bobby Martin. This record, along with Before I Let Go by Maze, Fight the Power, Isley Brothers, anytime you play this record at a party, regardless of what kind of party it is, usually fills the dance floor. So you gotta have this record. And it's the long version, the 8-minute version, so it's a dance floor filler. Definitely you'd want to pick this up. The last one I have is Marvin Gaye's Hear My Dear. This was the record that was part of a divorce settlement between him and his wife, Anna Gordy, the Berry Gordy's sister. He had to give up the advance, and he had to give up all proceeds to this record. There wasn't any significant hits off this record, but if you love that sound of Marvin Gaye from the mid-70s, Hear My Dear, the live album with Got to Give It Up, you would probably like this album. And if you look at the gatefold, you'll see basically Marvin with all his studio equipment and the record, giving it to Anna Gordy, and this is represented with money, houses, cars, what have you. And I was surprised that Motown would actually let something like this pass through, but I guess at that time Marvin still had the artistic clout to pull something like this off. So if you're a fan of Marvin, I would definitely recommend picking up Hear My Dear. Good classic music from beginning to end. This has been Diggin in the City. You can find the episodes on all social media platforms at Beats and Blends, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And I'll see you digging in the city.